Chris Benoit was an enigma, a man who balanced on the knife's edge between dedication and obsession. Born on May 21, 1967, in Montreal, Canada, his journey from a determined young boy to a revered professional wrestler was marked by an intensity that few could match. From an early age, Chris displayed a single-minded drive that shaped his every decision. After moving to Alberta with his family, his obsession with athleticism began to take root. High school introduced him to weight training and bodybuilding, and by 16, he had set his sights on the grueling world of professional wrestling, a choice not for the faint of heart. Benoit's entry into wrestling was marked by relentless discipline. He trained in the infamous Dungeon, the harshest wrestling school of its time, run by the legendary Stu Hart. Here, trainees were pushed to their physical and mental limits, enduring punishing workouts and submission holds that tested their pain thresholds. Chris emerged from this crucible with the tenacity and skill to climb the ranks of the wrestling world. His technical mastery and no-nonsense style quickly earned him respect from peers and fans alike as he competed across promotions in the US and Japan, collecting championships and carving out a legacy as a wrestler's wrestler. Yet, success came at a cost. Wrestling's physical demands were brutal, and Chris's insistence on realism only compounded the toll on his body and mind. His signature move, a diving headbutt from the top rope, delivered a spectacle to audiences but inflicted relentless trauma on his brain. By the late 1990s, Chris was competing in over 100 matches a year, each one a testament to his willingness to sacrifice his well-being for his craft. The unprotected chair shots he absorbed further added to the mounting concussions, creating a silent storm that loomed over his future. As Benoit rose to prominence in World Championship Wrestling, his private life remained shrouded in mystery. Unlike many of his peers, he avoided the partying and excess synonymous with the wrestling lifestyle. Instead, he adhered to the rigorous discipline instilled during his time in the Dungeon, a trait that often veered into the obsessive. Fellow wrestler Chris Jericho once described finding Benoit backstage, punishing himself with 500 squats for a minor mistake made during a match, a glimpse into the perfectionism that defined him. BY 1997, Chris Benoit had become one of the brightest stars in World Championship Wrestling, a promotion riding high as the pinnacle of professional wrestling. It was during this period that Benoit became entangled in a storyline that blurred the lines between performance and reality, intertwining his life with that of Nancy Elizabeth Toffalone, known to fans as Woman. Nancy, born in Boston in 1964, had carved her path into wrestling through sheer happenstance. A chance photograph taken at a local wrestling event in Florida brought her to the attention of a photographer, which ultimately led to her becoming the on-screen valet of Kevin Sullivan, a wrestler known for his dark, cult leader persona. Nancy's striking beauty and mysterious allure made her the perfect counterpart to Sullivan's sinister character, and their professional relationship soon became personal, leading to their marriage in 1985. 4 years, Nancy and Sullivan toured the wrestling circuit, her career flourishing as she managed major stars in WCW. But in 1996, a storyline involving Chris Benoit would change everything. On screen, Chris was the hero who rescued Nancy from Sullivan's fictional cult. Off-screen, the storyline mirrored reality, as Chris and Nancy developed a romantic relationship that ultimately ended both their marriages. The fallout was explosive. In 1997, tensions boiled over when Sullivan discovered the affair, leading to a backstage fistfight between him and Benoit. Shortly after, Nancy and Sullivan divorced, and she disappeared from television, opting for a quieter life as Chris's business manager. By 2000, Nancy and Chris had married, and their family grew with the birth of their son, Daniel. Daniel, a joyful and affectionate child, was the center of Chris and Nancy's world. He inherited his father's stocky build and developed an early fascination with wrestling, idolizing Chris as both a father and a hero. Nancy nurtured Daniel's curiosity, sharing stories of her and Chris's adventures in the wrestling world. The family's bond seemed unbreakable, and their unity was on full display in 2004, when Chris achieved the pinnacle of his career by winning the WWE World Heavyweight Championship at Madison Square Garden. The image of Nancy and Daniel joining Chris in the ring, tears of pride in their eyes, cemented the Benoits as wrestling royalty. However, beneath the surface, the family's life was far from idyllic. Just a year before Chris's career-defining moment, Nancy filed for a restraining order and divorce, citing instances of Chris losing his temper and making threats. She expressed fear for her and Daniel's safety, a claim that shocked those who knew the disciplined and composed Benoit. The restraining order kept Chris away from his family for months, but in August 2003, Nancy unexpectedly dismissed her claims and the couple reconciled. The reasons behind her decision remain a mystery. Some speculated it was a tactical move, while others feared she may have been driven by a sense of helplessness. Despite this attempt to restore normalcy, the tensions within the Benoit household lingered. 4 years later, the fragile veneer of their seemingly perfect life would shatter in the most horrific way imaginable. The legacy of Chris Benoit, a man celebrated for his dedication and skill, was destroyed in an instant, leaving behind a tragedy that stunned the wrestling world and forever overshadowed his achievements. By 2007, the toll of Chris Benoit's punishing lifestyle was becoming increasingly evident. Years of grueling physical demands, escalating steroid use, and the tragic deaths of many close friends weighed heavily on him. The loss of Eddie Guerrero, his best friend and confidant, just 18 months earlier, marked a turning point. Chris's grief was palpable. He confided to fellow wrestler Chavo Guerrero that he couldn't handle the constant loss. Letters in his diary revealed a man battling addiction to painkillers and a deep, long-standing depression, though he spoke lovingly of his wife, Nancy, and their son, Daniel, calling them his anchors in an ever-darkening world. In early 2007, Chris's behavior became more erratic. His paranoia grew severe. He believed he was being followed, though he never specified by whom. This fear drove him to memorize dozens of routes to his local gym, borrow cars to avoid being tracked, and beg Nancy to stay home with Daniel for their safety. Even as WWE planned to crown him with another championship, Chris distrusted the gesture, convinced his career was in jeopardy. To those close to him, his increasingly bizarre actions raised alarms, though the true depth of his struggle remained obscured. On June 21, 2007, Nancy sent a chilling text message to a friend, writing, "I'm scared to death. If anything happens to me, look at Chris." The following day, Chris returned home from a doctor's visit with a new supply of steroids. The family appeared to enjoy a normal evening, barbecuing in the backyard and spending time together. But when night fell, so did the darkness within Chris. After Nancy tucked Daniel into bed, Chris attacked her in her upstairs office, using his immense strength to incapacitate her. He restrained her with industrial tape and, in a brutal act of violence, strangled her with a TV cable, leaving her lifeless on the floor. He then wrapped her body in a towel, placed a Bible beside her, and left the room. Hours later, Chris entered Daniel's bedroom. Surrounded by wrestling memorabilia and posters of his father, Daniel lay peacefully asleep, unaware of the tragedy unfolding around him. Chris woke his son and sedated him with Xanax before strangling him, leaving another Bible beside the young boy's body. By the morning of June 23, 2007, the unthinkable had occurred. Chris Benoit, once celebrated as a loving family man, had murdered his wife and son in a horrifying act of violence. Despite the unimaginable events, Chris struggled to maintain an appearance of normalcy. He was scheduled to perform at WWE events that weekend in Texas, and on the afternoon of June 23rd, he called Chavo Guerrero, claiming Daniel was sick with food poisoning. Though Chris assured Chavo he would make it to the show, something in his voice felt off. Before ending the call, Chris uncharacteristically said, "I love you." Chavo found the comment odd, but assumed Chris was simply being sincere. As the weekend progressed, Chris missed both scheduled appearances. On June 24th, between 4 and 5 a.m., he sent a series of cryptic text messages to 5 co-workers. The messages included his home address and odd details about his dogs and the garage door being open. Chavo received the same messages from both Chris and Nancy's phones, unaware that Chris had sent them himself. WWE officials, concerned by his absence and the strange messages, contacted Fayetteville police to perform a welfare check. The first to respond was Benoit's neighbor, Holly Skepfer, who often cared for the family's dogs. After securing the 2 German shepherds, Holly cautiously ascended the stairs of the eerily silent home, calling out for Nancy or Daniel. But there was no response. Daniel's bedroom door was open, so Holly peered inside. There, his small body lay still in blue SpongeBob pajamas, with a children's Bible beside him. His skin bore the unmistakable pallor of death. His mother, Nancy, was found in her first-floor office, her hands and feet bound, a TV cable wound tightly around her neck. Upstairs in the basement gym, police uncovered the body of Chris Benoit. In an act of grim ingenuity, he had transformed his weight machine into a device to end his own life, using its pulley system to snap his neck. The meticulous construction of the contraption underscored the chilling precision with which Chris orchestrated his family's demise. Initially, tributes poured in for the man once celebrated as the Canadian crippler. WWE aired a special memorial show honoring his two-decade career with highlights of his greatest matches. But within 48 hours, the horrifying details emerged, and the adulation turned to shock and disgust. The wrestling world was left grappling with how one of its most revered figures could commit such unspeakable acts. Questions flooded in. What drove Chris Benoit to kill his wife and son, and then himself? Was it premeditated, or the result of a momentary lapse into madness? Theories abounded. Some speculated on involvement by Kevin Sullivan, but investigators quickly dismissed this. Others suggested that Daniel might have suffered from Fragile X syndrome, a genetic disorder leading to physical and intellectual impairments, and that Chris's despair over his son's condition triggered the murders. However, Daniel's autopsy revealed no such condition. Another theory centered on Chris's rampant steroid use. At the time of his death, his testosterone levels were 10 times the average, sparking rumors of a steroid-fueled roid rage. Yet the calculated nature of the murders, complete with sedatives, carefully placed Bibles, and a sophisticated execution device, made this explanation implausible. The most compelling insight came months later from the Sports Legacy Institute. Examining Chris Benoit's brain, researchers found extensive damage caused by years of untreated concussions and head trauma. His brain resembled that of an 80-year-old dementia patient. The cumulative impact of diving headbutts, unprotected chair shots, and relentless matches had left him neurologically impaired, with symptoms including paranoia, depression, and cognitive decline. While this revelation shed light on his deteriorated mental state, it could not fully explain or excuse his action. Adding to the surreal nature of the case was a chilling coincidence. 14 hours before the bodies were discovered, an anonymous edit to Chris Benoit's Wikipedia page claimed his absence from WWE events was due to personal issues stemming from the death of his wife, Nancy. Investigators traced the edit to a WWE fan in Connecticut who claimed it was a morbid joke based on speculation about Benoit's no-shows. The timing only deepened the mystery, feeding conspiracies and public confusion. In the aftermath, WWE erased Chris Benoit from its history, removing all footage, accolades, and references to his name. His legacy became a cautionary tale, forcing the wrestling industry to confront its dark underbelly. For decades, wrestlers endured punishing schedules, untreated injuries, and unchecked substance abuse, all in service of spectacle and profit. The Benoit tragedy exposed the human cost of an industry that prioritized entertainment over the well-being of its performers. The aftermath of the Benoit tragedy forced a reckoning within the wrestling world and beyond, prioritizing safety in a way previously unheard of. Today, national wrestling promotions, led by WWE, enforce strict policies to prevent the kind of in-ring abuse that defined Chris Benoit's career. These changes have ripple effects across sports, pushing leagues like the NFL and NHL to confront their own concussion crises. Research into head trauma has expanded exponentially since 2008, with policies on concussion protocols implemented across major U.S. sports leagues by 2012. Much of this progress can be traced back to individuals like Christopher Nowinski, a former wrestler turned advocate who co-founded the Sports Legacy Institute. Nowinski's work on the long-term effects of brain trauma highlighted the silent epidemic within contact sports. Others, like Miami Dolphins legend Nick Bonacconi, also championed the cause. Bonacconi, who experienced debilitating consequences from untreated head injuries, founded the Miami Project to Cure Paralysis and later established a fund specifically for CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, research. His efforts helped raise over $500 million for brain and spinal research. In a poignant final act of advocacy, Bonacconi donated his brain for research after his death in 2019, following a long battle with dementia brought on by his athletic career. The Benoit tragedy also brought attention to the human cost beyond the athlete. On July 14, 2007, a memorial service was held for Nancy and Daniel Benoit in Daytona Beach, Florida. The intimate gathering of 75 mourners included many of Nancy's colleagues from her wrestling days and those who had known the family. Nancy's sister Sandra delivered a heartfelt eulogy, speaking of the bond between mother and son and the life stolen from them. "Daniel was Nancy's whole world," Sandra said. "They had a beautiful future. Our hope is that through significant research and awareness, this kind of tragedy will never repeat itself." The legacy of the Benoit family tragedy is one of profound loss, but it also serves as a catalyst for change. Increased awareness and advancements in concussion research have saved countless lives, even as the memory of those lost remains a somber reminder of what was sacrificed. While the wounds left behind may never fully heal, the hope is that these tragedies will drive continued progress, ensuring that athletes and their families are protected in ways Chris, Nancy, and Daniel were not.